Hello, everyone. My name is Tanner, and for this week's Interesting History episode, we're going to take a look at another historical based speech. Now, this one, fortunately enough, we get to actually watch. It's Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell address to the U.S. citizens just before he leaves for office. It's mostly known for the military industrial complex, as you can see from the title of this video here on YouTube. But I was actually interested to see the part that he talks about after the military industrial complex. And we're just going to watch it here, and then I'll pause and kind of just give brief insight onto each different point here. So let's go ahead and get started.
From the White House in the office of the President of the United States, we present an address by Dwight D. Eisenhower. This is the farewell address for President Eisenhower, whose 8 years as chief executive...
And there'll be a link down in the description below if you want to watch it at the same time.
...he'd come to an end at noon Friday. Mr. Eisenhower has chosen this time for his final speech. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. First, I should like to express my gratitude to the radio and television networks for the opportunities they have given me over the years to bring reports and messages to our nation. My special thanks go to them for the opportunity of addressing you this evening. 3 days from now, after half a century in the service of our country, I shall lay down the responsibilities of office as, in traditional and solemn ceremony, the authority of the presidency is vested in my successor. This evening, I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen.
So when he says 50, half a century of service, Dwight D. Eisenhower joined the Army, I believe in his teens, served in World War I, and obviously was the Supreme Allied Commander in World War II before becoming U.S. President. So when he says 50 years, he's talking about his military service as well. Something that I'm going to bring up now, because it kind of confused me as I watched this previously, is he has his speech in front of him here, I think, but he continually looks to the other directions. Like you saw in that opening part, he read from here, and then he looked over here. And then later in the speech, he's going to be reading from something over here because his eyes keep deflecting to the left. But I digress. It just confused me.
Like every other citizen, I wish the new president and all who will labor with him Godspeed. I pray that the coming years will be blessed with peace and prosperity for all. Our people expect their president and the Congress to find essential agreement on issues of great moment, the wise resolution of which will better shape the future of the nation. My own relations with the Congress, which began on a remote and tenuous basis when, long ago, a member of the Senate appointed me to West Point, have since ranged to the intimate during the war and immediate post-war period, and finally to the mutually interdependent during these past 8 years. In this final relationship, the Congress and the administration have, on most vital issues, cooperated well to serve the nation good rather than mere partisanship, and so have assured that the business of the nation should go forward. So my official relationship with the Congress ends in a feeling, on my part, of gratitude that we have been able to do so much together.
Now, something that's pretty interesting here is that there was recently, I think it's C-SPAN does a poll based on U.S. historians every 4 years, I think, for their list of presidents from 1 to 44 now. And Dwight D. Eisenhower is always in the top 10. Now, in terms of like social policies, Dwight D. Eisenhower doesn't do all that much. I mean, is the GI Bill passed in his tenure? That might be one. And maybe like the ending of the Korean War, but as a top 10 president, you kind of tend to think of like social, wide-ranging movements or policies that kind of changed the U.S. basis, and maybe like the non-use of nuclear weapons, that sort of thing is what puts him in the top 10. But for me, I think it might literally just be based on his military service that people put in the top 10. I do want to do an eventual episode on just taking a look at like different that C-SPAN poll itself, just to kind of see what people you can kind of guess what the top 5 are, but Dwight D. Eisenhower, I think, had the biggest jump in the last 4 years. And it kind of shows you like how the historiography of things change. So like the further you get away from a president, if they didn't really do anything important, they kind of tend to drop back. But Dwight D. Eisenhower, I don't believe, was in the top 10 in the previous poll and then jumped up to like 7th.
We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. 3 of these involved our own country. Despite these holocausts, America is today the strongest, the most influential, and most productive nation in the world. Understandably proud of this preeminence, we yet realize that America's leadership and prestige depend not merely upon our unmatched material progress, riches, and military strength, but on how we use our power in the interest of world peace and human betterment. Throughout America's adventure in free government, our basic purposes have been to keep the peace, to foster progress in human achievement, and to enhance liberty, dignity, and integrity among peoples and among nations. To strive for less would be unworthy of a free and religious people. Any failure traceable to arrogance or our lack of comprehension or readiness to sacrifice would inflict upon us grievous hurt, both at home and abroad. Progress toward these noble goals is persistently threatened by the conflict now engulfing the world.
So here he's kind of talking about that it's not necessarily the military might that makes America great. It's the things that we do instead of the military might. And it's very interesting coming from someone that served in the military before becoming president, that he would believe that the non-use of military force is the stronger notion as opposed to the use of military force. But now he's going to kind of go into the struggle against communism.
It commands our whole attention, absorbs our very beings. We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method.
So like in the last 30 seconds, he referenced religion twice. And that was kind of something big, too, that came about as a counter to communism. And that's a lot of the reasons why, like, especially the Republican Party picked up religion in the 50s and 60s, because of the combat against communism. They were the atheist, non-religion people. And you can kind of still see, I mean, obviously still today in the U.S. Republican Party, religion, Catholicism, is still a major factor behind the party itself.
Unhappily, the danger it poses promises to be of indefinite duration. To meet it successfully,
I don't want to pause a lot, but he just referenced communism as an indefinite. So we obviously know that it ends 40 years after this.
there is call for not so much the emotional and transitory sacrifices of crisis, but rather those which enable us to carry forward steadily, surely, and without complaint, the burdens of a prolonged and complex struggle with liberty, the stake. Only thus shall we remain, despite every provocation, on our charted course toward permanent peace and human betterment. Crises there will continue to be. In meeting them, whether foreign or domestic, great or small, there is a recurring temptation to feel that some spectacular and costly action could become the miraculous solution to all current difficulties. A huge increase in newer elements of our defenses, development of unrealistic programs to cure every ill in agriculture, a dramatic expansion in basic and applied research. These and many other possibilities, each possibly promising in itself, may be suggested as the only way to the road we wish to travel. But each proposal...
So, as a reference there, he brought up the military, he brought up technology, and then maybe agriculture from what the curing of every ill that could also be based on technology, but at this point in the late 50s, early 60s, probably not. But there's the big three that he wants to talk about in his speech.
Proposal must be weighed in the light of a broader consideration: the need to maintain balance in and among national programs.
So there you go. You don't want to go down one path. You want to split those evenly.
Balance between the private and the public economy. Balance between the cost and hoped for advantages. Balance between the clearly necessary and the comfortably desirable. Balance between our essential requirements as a nation and the duties imposed by the nation upon the individual. Balance between actions of the moment and the national welfare of the future. Good judgment seeks balance in progress. Lack of it eventually finds imbalance and frustration. The record of many decades stands as proof that our people and their government have, in the main, understood these truths and have responded to them well in the face of threat and stress. But threats, new in kind or degree, constantly arise. Of these I mention two only.
And I don't know if people are actually in the room here. Like, you kind of get the sense that people are moving back behind the camera, and he's kind of like watching them as they're walking around, because now he's looking over to the right, and he like just stared at the right for 10 straight seconds. So I don't know if they had like additional talking points on the sides of the camera, but kind of he keeps doing it.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment.
Because now he doesn't look down here.
Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations.
Now that is an interesting point. I don't know if that's still the same way today. So what he's saying is the U.S. budget for military is bigger than all of the U.S. corporations. I don't think that that's true anymore with the likes of like Facebook and Google and that sort of stuff. I guess we spend 600, or Trump just added an additional 600 billion in spending. So maybe, I guess that could be true still.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications.
So what he's saying here is that the military is now embedded not only economically into the U.S. economy, but it's also into private life and politically. So a little bit of a warning for military kind of weaving its way into normal everyday life.
Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
So there's the final warning that you kind of hear about the military-industrial complex. He's saying don't let the military get weaved in to the economic, the political, and everyday life. And it's really interesting, too, because this is a man, like we talked about earlier, 50 years of his life were spent in the military. And he's the one warning the U.S. people, like, hey, you see this? We're building up all this military over here. You might want to watch what they're doing. Like, I might be a part of it, and you could believe me because I was a, whatever, 5-6-star general. I was in charge of the Allied troops in Europe. Watch out for these guys over here.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
So there you go. The warning that military could danger our political freedoms and our just basic free of our rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Akin to and large...
Also, another interesting point there, when he talks about an intelligent and able-bodied citizenry. So, kind of like saying, hey, like, stay up to date on stuff over here. Just stay up to abreast of all the things that are happening politically. And basically what he warned was going to happen ended up happening. If you look at it now, and it was kind of the way that the U.S. politics system had always worked, is it's definitely a corrupt sort of political system with the money that gets spent.
Largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades.
Okay, so now he's going to start talking about the part that you don't normally hear from the speech. So like the military-industrial complex, like look at it, warning, military-industrial complex. Now he's going to go like, hey, look at this technology thing. You might want to also watch out for that. And this is kind of like the thing that you enjoy out of modern day life. So it's interesting to see him in 1960 be warning us about the dangers of what technology could bring.
In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, or at the direction of the federal government. Today, the solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity.
So now he's kind of warning, previously, like advances technologically or industrially were often done just by random people, kind of doing just tinkering stuff on their own. And now he's seeing a shift towards, you know, if you think of like the Manhattan Project, a team of scientists focused on one thing, being paid by the government to do this thing, as opposed to what he was explaining was these universities used to be places where free thoughts happened and ideas were just kind of brought up from that. And now if they're not getting the money from the government, he doesn't see that as happening anymore. And that's still kind of true.
For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers.
The warning of computers.
The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is greatly to be regarded.
Yep.
Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. It is the task of statesmanship to mold, to balance, and to integrate these and other forces, new and old, within the principles of our democratic system, ever aiming toward the supreme goals of our free society. Another factor in maintaining balance involves the element of time. As we peer into society's future, we, You and I and our government must avoid the impulse to live only for today, plundering for our own ease and convenience the precious resources of tomorrow.
Still something very poignant today, right? Global warming. The new U.S. administration just rescinded like all of the environmental stuff that Obama did in the previous administration. He's warning about plundering for resources and not leaving stuff for the future and just making money today.
We cannot mortgage the material assets of our grandchildren without risking the loss also of their political and spiritual heritage. We want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become the insolvent phantom of tomorrow. During the long lane of the history yet to be written, America knows that this world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate, and be instead a proud confederation of mutual trust and respect.
Something that's very difficult today, right? So he's saying we don't want to turn into a nation of fearful people. We want to include others and be free, essentially.
Such a confederation must be one of equals. The weakest must come to the conference table with the same confidence as do we, protected as we are by our moral, economic, and military strength. That table, though scarred by many past frustrations, cannot be abandoned for the certainty agony of disarmament of the battlefield. Disarmament with mutual honor and confidence is a continuing imperative. Together we must learn how to compose differences, not with arms, but with intellect and decent purpose. Because this need is so sharp and apparent, I confess that I lay down my official responsibilities in this field with a definite sense of disappointment. As one who has witnessed the horror and the lingering sadness of war, as one who knows that another war could utterly destroy this civilization, which has been so slowly and painfully built over thousands of years, I wish I could say tonight that a lasting peace is in sight. Happily, I can say that war has been avoided. Steady progress toward our ultimate goal has been made, but so much remains to be done. As a private citizen, I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road. So in this, my last good night to you as your president, I thank you for the many opportunities you have given me.
Okay, so we'll end the speech there. Overall, it's a pretty powerful speech, and you can kind of see that he himself was not, he wasn't brought up a politician. He was someone that was in the military that became president. And he's giving you a lot of warnings that people that maybe get thrown into political life late in their life, like he became president, I believe, probably in his 60s, what the sort of stuff that he sees, and he's trying to tell the American people the sort of stuff they need to be looking out for. So it's a pretty powerful speech. I don't think you would get these sorts of warnings from presidents anymore. Maybe, especially not the current one. Obama, maybe you could have seen some warnings. Did he televise his? He might have televised his farewell speech. But this is still a pretty powerful one. I want to thank you guys very much for watching. If you're interested in helping out either the History Channel or the Gaming Channel, there's a link down below. If you shop on Amazon, you can click that link and it'll just bring you to the Amazon homepage normally. But anything that you purchase from there, I get a little bit of a kickback from Amazon, and that helps me out greatly. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you enjoyed it, a like button would be greatly appreciated. Thank you again very much for watching. Talk to you next week.